Hello again. In this episode, we are going to discuss how to develop good habits. It's easier than you may think because most people think it takes 21 or 30 days to develop a habit. You can actually form a habit in less than 60 seconds. So I'm going to share how. I'm going to review the one habit that transforms all the rest. And then I'm going to share with you a story about the concept when wisdom calls, don't give it a busy signal. So I'm Doug Andrew, and I'm very passionate about empowering people like you in recognizing moments that matter and developing habits. It's easier than you may think because we hear in school, oh, it takes 21 days. It takes 30 days to develop a habit. Actually, my friend Dr. Robert Cooper says there's no research that says it takes that long to develop a habit. So he began to study human behavior and realized that you can develop a habit in less than 60 seconds. Now, I'm going to give you the short version of how to do this, but you choose a triggering event that happens daily, maybe 2 or 3 times a day. So for example, one habit that I've developed is to read from a good book or from scripture every night, or to pray. And so one thing that I do every night is I plug in my cell phone. So I'm plugging in to charge up my cell phone. Well, I've taken a few minutes to envision and embed in my brain whenever I have that triggering event and I plug in my phone to charge it up, I plug into God. That reminds me to plug into God. I cannot plug in my phone without thinking of praying. That's a triggering event that tells me, oh, it's time for me to plug into God. I travel a lot. And so when I hear the landing gear come down on the plane, because I used to be a private pilot, when I hear the landing gear come down on a plane, I know I have about 120 seconds before that plane hits the tarmac. And so I repeat 13 positive affirmations because it takes me exactly 120 seconds to do that. When I do a 2-minute bridge, every morning I do a 2-minute bridge. Instead of using a stopwatch or counting, I recite these 13 affirmations in first person as my stopwatch. Whenever I swing my feet off the floor to get into bed, that triggers, ooh, it's time to write down my 3 wins for the day. I have a habit of thinking about the three positive accomplishments, what's going right in my life, instead of focusing on what went wrong during the day. And I like to be on a win streak. So all these little habits of taking 60 seconds and writing down the 3 positive accomplishments, the 3 wins, or leaning over in bed and saying, honey, what were your 3 wins for the day? And then I share my 3 wins. That is all triggered that fast from taking my feet off the floor. It took me less than 60 seconds to develop that habit because I put in my brain, whenever this happens, what will my brain automatically remember to do? So that's one quick way to develop a habit. Now, I shared in another episode this one habit that transforms all the rest. So let me review this before I share with you a powerful story about moments that matter, because we are caught up in the busyness of life. And we have to sort of slow down and recognize in any moment in the present, you're here, okay? That this moment matters. And as you notice, you take time to pause for an instant to spark curiosity instead of, again, reacting automatically and you entrench yourself and that's just the way I am, don't bother me, and da-da-da. That's not a good way to be, and frankly, that's a mindless reaction state. You want to be super fluid with life. I have a beatitude, blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape. You have to be flexible as your kids come up and interrupt you, or a client, customer. The customers are the very purpose of your work, not an interruption of your work. You can't believe how many employees don't understand that. Then you lean into what's possible in that moment. So you begin to think, oh, what's possible as I have this interaction with this client, this customer, with this phone call, with this child coming to me. And then you become better, more capable, caring, and creative than ever before, instead of this entrenchment in our old ways. When you develop this habit of recognizing, this moment matters, you pause, You lean in to what's possible and you become better. You choose your response instead of the automatic, just mindless reaction state, and you're angry or upset because you got interrupted. So I'm going to share with you a story that illustrates this. So I have a saying, when wisdom calls, don't give it a busy signal. Now, when I thought about this, in order to feel a little bit better about myself, I had to first ask myself, when didn't I give wisdom when it called a busy signal? Because I have to feel like, okay, I'm not all that bad. And then I can ask myself, when did I give wisdom when it called a busy signal? So let me share with you a little story about one time I'm very grateful when wisdom called, I didn't give it a busy signal. This is a special story for me, and it happened back in 1985. So let me sit down and share with you my mother and my father. Back in 1985, we're celebrating their 48th wedding anniversary. And so we had a wonderful dinner at a local restaurant with all of my siblings. I have 5 other siblings. My mother looked like $1,000,000 that night. But you see, 7 years earlier, she had had an open heart surgery in 1978, a quadruple bypass by a renowned surgeon by the name of Russell M. Nelson. And my dad asked him privately after the surgery, how long do you think she's got? He said at that time, I'm not a prophet, but I think she's got about 7 years. Well, it had been 7 years. So after that evening at the restaurant, a few days later, I was helping my cousins open a jewelry store. And I had helped design this jewelry store. It was beautiful, located in a local mall, Layton Hills Mall in Utah. And I was getting that store ready for the grand opening the next day. And I had to go out. I had about 90 minutes to pick up some very critical items for the grand opening. And so I'm going out of the mall. I closed the gate down and I'm going down the escalator to go out to my car to pick up these critical items. And coming up the escalator was my mother and father. Now, I said, Mom, Dad, what are you doing here? They said, oh, we were just out for a ride. Yeah, right. They lived an hour away down in Orem. I said, oh, golly, we have a grand opening tomorrow. I've got to pick up some critical items. I'm late. They go, oh, we didn't tell you we were coming. Just go do your things, Doug. We'll just look through the gate. Well, I said, I'm so sorry. And they said, go. So as I went down the escalator, went out to the parking lot, wisdom called. And it said to me, Doug, slow down. Spend this time with your mother and your father. All reason said, I don't have time to do this. But that day when wisdom called, I didn't give it a busy signal. I turned around and I started going back up that escalator. They were at the top going, Doug, go do your stuff. I said, no, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out the grand opening without those items. So I went up against their insistence. They finally gave in. I opened the gate. We went in and I showed them around the jewelry store, the diamond room and the concepts. I went over across and got my mother some Rum Victoria chocolates, her favorite, and we visited for about 20, 30 minutes. I had no idea that would be the final 30 minutes I had with my mother. You see, a couple of days later, I was mowing my lawn on a Saturday morning and the phone rang and it was my dad and he said, son, your mother's had another heart attack. She's in a coma. The aneurysm may burst and she will likely pass on today. If you want to come down and say goodbye with the rest of the family, I would recommend you hurry. We went down and gathered as a family. My mother did pass away that day. I will never regret that day in the mall when wisdom called that I didn't give it a busy signal, because now I treasure that last 30 minutes I had with my mother. See, sometimes in the busyness of life, we get so wrapped up in what's going on, we sometimes don't see those moments that matter. And so when I ask myself questions like, well, that's a time when I didn't give it a busy signal, but how about the times I did? I've learned to become better. So let me share one other statistic with you that will help you understand moments that matter. I serve on a board for teenage suicide prevention. In fact, I have helped at a crisis center teenagers who have attempted suicide several times for the last 6 years. Now, I work with a man by the name of Greg Hudnall, who establishes Hope Squads in various high schools and junior highs. And he is able to reduce the suicide rate in these schools dramatically by actually having these kids who get depressed, who will not go to their parents, but they'll go to their peers and share that they're feeling depressed or they're feeling like they want to end their life. So it's a very powerful organization establishing these Hope Squads. Well, Mr. Hudnall is oftentimes asked to go and give grief counseling when there is a suicide. Now, recently, he shared with me that out of the last 53 suicides in the state of Utah, where we live, 49 of the 53 parents of those teenagers had no clue their son or daughter was even depressed. What does that tell us? We can become better, more sensitive to those moments that matter. He found out that they wouldn't go share with their parents. Maybe their parents said, oh, they're just emotional right now. But they found that in every single one of those cases, those teenagers at least shared with one other friend that they were thinking of taking their life. And that's why we established these Hope Squads where they can wear, these teenagers wear t-shirts that are on the Hope Squad. There's about 40 in a student body of 2,000, and they know they can go share with them, and they're nominated by the students. And it's not always the student body president. It is somebody that they know is non-judgmental and that they will keep the confidence and they will point them to the right help or counseling. The point is, in this day and age, we live in this world of selfies. And people go around and they're in front of the tower in Paris, okay, the Eiffel Tower or the London Bridge, and they're all, look at me and so forth, and they didn't notice the little woman selling flowers or the pigeons or this, that, or the other, because we're so consumed in the selfie. Look where I was, but they really weren't there. They were just superficially there, but they didn't see really what was going on because moments that mattered were happening all around them. So my challenge to you is to recognize the moments that matter. And when wisdom calls, don't give it a busy signal. I recommend you watch this episode here so that you can understand what I'm talking about between the different types of moments that matter.